The evening rain pattered against the window of the Fields townhouse drawing room, mirroring the nervous rhythm of Lady Blanche Fields's heart. She stood perfectly still as her lady's maid adjusted the lace on her evening gown, her eyes fixed on the reflection of the young woman before her. At 20 years of age, Blanche had always known her future would be determined by duty rather than desire. Her father, the Earl of Westwick, had made that abundantly clear throughout her upbringing. "Hold still, my lady," whispered Agnes, her maid of 7 years, as she carefully pinned a pearl hairpin into Blanche's golden-brown curls. "Your father expects you downstairs promptly." Blanche nodded slightly, careful not to disturb Agnes's work. "Has he arrived yet?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. Agnes paused, her eyes meeting Blanche's in the mirror. "No, my lady, but your parents and Lord Fitzwilliam are waiting in the drawing-room." Lord Fitzwilliam, her father's oldest friend and the man who had orchestrated what was to be her future, a future that now included marriage to Archibald Prescott, the Duke of Thornwood, a man whose name alone was enough to silence a room. When Agnes had finished, Blanche dismissed her with a grateful nod and moved to the window. The street below was dark and empty, save for the occasional carriage passing by, wheels splashing through puddles. Somewhere out there was the man she was to marry, a man she had never met, but whose reputation preceded him like a shadow. The Duke of Thornwood was not merely a peer of the realm. He was a figure of dark fascination among London society. At 35, he had never married, preferring instead the company of cards, horses, and, if rumours were to be believed, a string of mistresses across the continent. Some whispered of duels fought at dawn, of fortunes won and lost at his gaming tables, of a temper as unpredictable as the English weather. "Blanche," her mother's voice carried up the stairs, "come down at once." With a final glance at her reflection, Blanche straightened her shoulders and left the sanctuary of her room. She descended the stairs slowly, one hand trailing the polished banister, each step bringing her closer to the conversation that would seal her fate. The drawing-room fell silent as she entered. Her father, the Earl, stood by the fireplace, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the room. Her mother, the Countess, sat rigidly on the settee, her face a careful mask of composure. Lord Fitzwilliam, a portly gentleman with thinning hair, rose from his seat and bowed slightly. "Ah, Lady Blanche," Lord Fitzwilliam said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, "looking as lovely as ever." "Thank you, Lord Fitzwilliam," Blanche replied with practiced courtesy, taking a seat beside her mother. Her father cleared his throat. "Blanche, Lord Fitzwilliam has brought news. The Duke of Thornwood has accepted our proposal. The marriage will take place in 3 weeks' time." Though she had expected it, the finality of the statement struck Blanche like a physical blow. "So soon?" she managed to ask, her voice surprisingly steady. "His Grace sees no reason for delay," Lord Fitzwilliam interjected. "And I must say, Lady Blanche, you should consider yourself fortunate. The Duke could have his pick of any young lady in England. Many families have sought an alliance with Thornwood." "And why has he chosen me?" Blanche asked, ignoring her mother's warning glance. Lord Fitzwilliam exchanged a look with her father before answering. "The Duke requires a bride of impeccable lineage and proper upbringing. Your father's estates border his lands in Hampshire. It is a prudent match. Prudent. Not romantic, not passionate, not even promising happiness. Prudent. The Duke will call tomorrow," her father announced. "You will receive him properly, Blanche. This alliance will secure our family's position for generations to come." Blanche knew what remained unsaid. Her father's gambling debts had mounted in recent years, and the Fields estate was in desperate need of the financial security this marriage would bring. She was the price to be paid. "Yes, father," she answered, lowering her eyes to hide the flash of rebellion within them. Later that night, as Blanche prepared for bed, a knock came at her door. Her mother entered, carrying a small package wrapped in cream-colored paper. "This arrived for you," the Countess said, handing Blanche the parcel. "From the Duke." Blanche took it with trembling hands. It was heavier than expected, and she unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a black velvet box. When she opened it, she gasped. A necklace of diamonds and sapphires gleamed against the dark velvet, the stones catching the candlelight and throwing prisms across the walls of her bedchamber. "It's beautiful," she whispered, unable to deny the exquisite craftsmanship. Indeed, her mother's voice softened. "Blanche, I know this is not the marriage you dreamed of as a girl, but you must understand that I have a duty to our family, Blanche finished for her. I understand, mother. The Countess sighed, reaching out to touch her daughter's cheek. The Duke is a powerful man with connections throughout England. He will provide for you, protect you. That is more than many women can hope for in a marriage. And his reputation? Blanche asked. The rumors of his temper, his gambling, his indiscretions. Men of his station often have reputations exaggerated by gossip, her mother replied carefully. Judge him by his actions toward you, not by drawing-room whispers. After her mother left, Blanche remained sitting on her bed, staring at the necklace. It was a cold, beautiful thing, much like the future that awaited her. She closed the box with a decisive snap and placed it on her dressing table. The following morning, Blanche was awakened by Agnes rushing into her room, her face flushed with excitement. "My lady, you must come quickly." Blanche sat up, alarmed. "What is it? What's happened?" "A delivery, my lady. For you. From the Duke." Blanche hastily donned her robe and followed Agnes downstairs. In the entrance hall stood a large arrangement of exotic flowers, unlike anything Blanche had ever seen. Deep purple blooms mingling with white lilies and sprays of delicate ferns. And in the center, stark against the vibrant colors, was a single black rose. Her father was examining a card that had accompanied the flowers. He handed it to her without comment, his expression unreadable. Written in a bold, slashing hand were the words, "Bella e perigosa, como nos." "What does it mean?" Blanche asked, staring at the foreign words. "Beautiful and dangerous, like us," her father translated grimly. "It seems the Duke has a flair for the dramatic." "Or a warning," Blanche murmured to herself. The morning passed in a blur of anticipation. By noon, Blanche was dressed in her finest day gown, a confection of pale blue silk that her mother insisted brought out the color of her eyes. She sat in the drawing room, attempting to focus on her embroidery, while her stomach twisted with nerves. When the Duke's carriage finally arrived, the entire household seemed to hold its breath. Blanche heard the crunch of wheels on gravel, the voices of footmen, the sound of heavy boots on the marble floor of the entrance hall. And then he was there, filling the doorway of the drawing room with his presence before he had even stepped inside. Archibald Prescott, the Duke of Thornwood, was not what Blanche had expected. She had imagined someone older, perhaps, with the dissipated look of a dedicated libertine. Instead, the man who bowed formally to her father was tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders, encased in a perfectly tailored dark coat. His face was handsome in a severe way, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that captured Blanche's attention, grey as storm clouds and just as turbulent. Those eyes turned to her now, and Blanche felt herself being assessed, measured, perhaps found wanting. "Lady Blanche," the Duke said, his voice deep and controlled, "it is a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance." She cursed deeply, as she had been taught since childhood. "Your Grace, the pleasure is mine." His mouth curved slightly, though the expression could hardly be called a smile. "Is it? I wonder?" He turned to her father. "My lord, might I have a moment alone with your daughter?" The Earl hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and the desire to please his future son-in-law. "Perhaps the garden would be suitable. You will have privacy, while remaining within sight of the house." The Duke inclined his head in agreement, and Blanche found herself being escorted outside, her hand resting lightly on his arm. His muscles were firm beneath the fine wool of his coat, and she could feel the heat of him even through layers of fabric. They walked in silence until they reached a stone bench partially sheltered by a flowering apple tree. The Duke gestured for her to sit, while he remained standing, his tall figure imposing against the backdrop of carefully tended roses. "I imagine you have questions," he said without preamble. Blanche looked up at him, surprised by his directness. "Several, Your Grace." "Ask them." She hesitated, gathering her courage. "Why me? There must be dozens of young ladies more suitable, with larger dowries, more influential connections." The Duke studied her for a long moment. "I require a wife who understands duty, who will not expect romantic nonsense or interfere with my affairs. Your father assures me you have been raised to know your place." Each word was like a slap, confirming her worst fears. "I see. And the black rose. What was the meaning of that gesture?" Something flickered in his eyes, amusement perhaps. A reminder, Lady Blanche, that appearances can be deceiving. The black rose is not truly black, merely so deep a red that it appears so in certain light. And you, Your Grace, are you different in certain light as well? For the first time, she saw genuine surprise cross his face, quickly masked by his usual impassive expression. You are bold for one so young. Forgive me, she said quickly, lowering her eyes. I spoke out of turn. No. His voice had softened slightly. It is refreshing. Most people are too afraid to speak truth in my presence. Should I be afraid? The question escaped before she could stop it. The Duke's face hardened again. Yes, Lady Blanche. Perhaps you should. Before she could respond, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small box covered in black velvet. Your betrothal gift. I expect you to wear it at the dinner Lord and Lady Harrington are hosting tomorrow night. Blanche accepted the box with trembling hands. Inside lay a ring of astounding beauty, a large sapphire surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. It belonged to my grandmother, the Duke said, watching her reaction closely. The last Duchess of Thornwood whom I actually respected. It's beautiful, Blanche whispered, genuinely moved by both the gift and its history. It suits you, he replied, taking the ring and sliding it onto her finger. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his hands warm against her cold fingers. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Blanche felt something shift between them, a recognition perhaps, or a silent acknowledgement of their shared future. Then the moment passed, and the Duke stepped back, his face once again an unreadable mask. I will call for you tomorrow at 7. Be ready. With that he bowed formally and walked back toward the house, leaving Blanche alone with the weight of the ring on her finger and the unsettling feeling that she had glimpsed something beneath the Duke's fearsome reputation, something that made her wonder if perhaps there was more to Archibald Prescott than the world was permitted to see. The Harrington ballroom was ablaze with light, hundreds of candles reflecting off crystal chandeliers and the jewels of London's elite. Blanche stood at the entrance, her hand resting on the Duke of Thornwood's arm, acutely aware of the hush that fell over the crowd as they were announced. His Grace, the Duke of Thornwood, and Lady Blanche Fields, the butler intoned, his voice carrying across the vast room. All eyes turned toward them, and Blanche felt the weight of countless stares, some curious, some envious, some openly pitying. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin, determined not to show any sign of the anxiety churning within her. The Duke guided her down the stairs with practiced ease, his hand firm at her back. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. They're wondering how a lamb such as yourself ended up with the wolf, he murmured, amusement coloring his voice. Shall we give them something to truly gossip about? Before she could respond, he had swept her onto the dance floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz. His hand at her waist was possessive, his lead commanding as he guided her through the steps with unexpected grace for a man of his size. You dance well, Your Grace, Blanche observed, finding her voice at last. One of many skills I've cultivated over the years, he replied, his eyes never leaving her face. You seem surprised. I confess I did not expect, she hesitated, refinement. His mouth curved into that not-quite smile she was beginning to recognize. I may have a reputation for savagery, Lady Blanche, but I am not a complete barbarian. I did not mean to offend. You didn't. He twirled her expertly around a corner of the dance floor. Tell me, what else have you heard about your future husband? I find myself curious about my own reputation. Blanche felt heat rise to her cheeks. It would not be proper to repeat such things. Ah, but I insist. Consider it your first duty to me, absolute honesty. She met his gaze directly, gathering her courage. They say you fought duels at dawn over gambling debts and women's honor, that you've broken men financially at your gaming tables without remorse, that your temper is unpredictable. Is that all? He asked, seeming almost disappointed. There is more, but I would rather not. The women, he supplied. They've told you about the women. Blanche looked away, unable to maintain eye contact during such an improper conversation. Yes. His grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. And does that concern you, Lady Blanche? The prospect of sharing your husband with others? Would it matter if it did? She countered, surprising herself with her boldness. The music came to an end, and the Duke stepped back, bowing formally. But as he straightened, She caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. "You continue to surprise me," he said quietly. "Come, there are people you should meet." He led her through the crowded ballroom, stopping occasionally to exchange brief greetings. Blanche noted how conversations faltered as they approached, how men straightened and women lowered their eyes. The Duke's power was palpable, his influence evident in every interaction. They were approached by a striking woman in her early 30s, dressed in a gown of deep burgundy that bordered on scandalous in its design. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style adorned with rubies, and her smile held secrets Blanche could only guess at. "Archibald," the woman purred, offering her hand, which the Duke kissed with practiced courtesy. "How delightful to see you tonight, and this must be your bride-to-be. Lady Blanche Fields, may I present Lady Eleanor Huntington, Countess of Blackmore," the Duke said formally. Lady Eleanor's eyes swept over Blanche with undisguised assessment. "How charming! So young, so fresh. Quite a departure from your usual taste, Archibald." "Eleanor," the Duke warned, his voice taking on an edge Blanche hadn't heard before. The Countess laughed lightly. "Forgive me, I merely wished to meet the woman who has finally captured the elusive Duke of Thornwood. You must be quite extraordinary, Lady Blanche." "I assure you I am quite ordinary, my lady," Blanche replied, instinctively disliking the woman though she couldn't precisely say why. "I doubt that very much." Lady Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Archibald has never been drawn to the ordinary. I look forward to becoming better acquainted in the coming months." She turned to the Duke. "You will save me a dance later, won't you, for old time's sake?" "My dance card is full this evening," he replied smoothly. "Perhaps another time." With a final assessing glance at Blanche, Lady Eleanor glided away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. "An old friend?" Blanche asked, struggling to keep her tone neutral. "Of a sort," the Duke replied vaguely. "Eleanor enjoys making others uncomfortable. Pay her no mind." Before Blanche could inquire further, they were approached by an older gentleman with kind eyes and a genial smile. "Thornwood! There you are, my boy," the man exclaimed, clasping the Duke's hand warmly. "And this must be Lady Blanche. My dear, you are even more lovely than rumours suggested." "Lady Blanche, this is Lord Henry Caldwell, a dear friend of my late father's," the Duke explained, his demeanour softening noticeably. Lord Henry took Blanche's hand between both of his. "I am delighted to meet you, my dear. When I heard Archibald had finally decided to wed, I could scarcely believe it. He has been in need of a steadying influence for quite some time." "You give me too little credit, Henry," the Duke protested, but there was no real offence in his tone. "And you give yourself too much," Lord Henry countered good-naturedly. He turned back to Blanche. "I hope you will call on Lady Caldwell soon. She is most eager to meet you, and would be happy to offer any guidance as you prepare for your new role as Duchess." "That is most kind," Blanche replied sincerely, warmed by the genuine welcome in the older man's manner. "I would be honoured." "Excellent. Now, Thornwood, if I might borrow you for just a moment. Sir William has some questions about that horse you're selling." The Duke hesitated, looking at Blanche. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" "Of course," she assured him. "I see some friends of my mother's. I'll join them until you return." With a nod, the Duke allowed himself to be led away by Lord Henry, leaving Blanche momentarily alone. She had just started toward a group of familiar faces when a hand caught her elbow, pulling her gently but firmly into a quiet alcove partially hidden by a large potted palm. "Lady Blanche, forgive my boldness, but I must speak with you urgently." The speaker was a young man perhaps a few years older than herself, handsome in a conventional way, with earnest brown eyes and a concerned expression. "Sir, this is most inappropriate," Blanche protested, trying to step away. "Please, just one moment. I am Edward Sinclair, Viscount Harley. I was a friend of your cousin Catherine at one time." Blanche stilled at the mention of her favourite cousin. "What about Catherine?" "It is not about her, but rather about the man you are to marry." Viscount Harley glanced around nervously. "You must know his reputation, but what you may not know is that there is truth behind the rumours. The Duke is dangerous, Lady Blanche. He has ruined men for the slightest offence, cast aside women without a thought for their reputation or feelings." "Why are you telling me this?" Blanche asked, her heart beating faster. "Because no one else will dare. Your father is too invested in this match, and society is too afraid of Thornwood's influence to warn you properly. His voice dropped even lower. 2 years ago, the Duke was engaged to marry Lady Victoria Pembroke. A week before the wedding, she broke off the engagement. 3 days later, she and her entire family left England for the continent. No one has heard from them since. Blanche felt a chill run through her. What are you suggesting? I suggest nothing, but I implore you to be careful. The Duke is not a man to be crossed or defied. He pressed something into her hand. If you ever need assistance, send word to me at this address. Day or night I will come. Before she could respond, Viscount Harley slipped away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Blanche looked down at the folded paper in her hand, then hastily tucked it into her glove as she spotted the Duke returning. "Who was that?" he asked sharply, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Just someone claiming acquaintance with my cousin," Blanche replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nothing of importance." The Duke's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not press further. "It's getting late. I think we've made a sufficient appearance for one evening." As they made their way toward the exit, Blanche caught sight of Lady Eleanor watching them from across the room, her expression calculating. The woman raised her glass in a mock toast, her ruby lips curved in a knowing smile. The carriage ride back to her family's townhouse was silent, the Duke seemingly lost in thought. Blanche used the opportunity to study him in the dim light of the carriage lanterns. His profile was strong, aristocratic, his expression remote. She wondered about Lady Victoria Pembroke and what had truly transpired to end their engagement. When they arrived, the Duke escorted her to the door, but did not enter. "I will call tomorrow to discuss final arrangements for the wedding," he said formally. "Good night, Lady Blanche." "Good night, Your Grace." She hesitated, then added impulsively, "Thank you for this evening." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. "You needn't thank me for doing my duty, Lady Blanche." "Is that all this is to you? Duty?" The question escaped before she could stop it. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. Then, without answering, he bowed and returned to his carriage, leaving Blanche with more questions than answers. The following days passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Dressmakers, florists, and various tradespeople paraded through the Fields townhouse from morning till night. Blanche was measured, pinned, and consulted on endless details, though she noted that many decisions had already been made by the Duke's efficient staff. 3 days before the wedding, as Blanche sat with her mother reviewing the guest list, a footman entered with a small package. "From His Grace, my lady," the servant announced, presenting it to Blanche. Inside was another black velvet box. When Blanche opened it, she gasped. Nestled against dark silk was a hairpin fashioned as a black rose, its petals crafted from some dark gemstone she could not identify, with a single dewdrop of diamond at its center. A note accompanied the gift. "Wear this on our wedding day." Her mother peered at the unusual ornament. "How distinctive. The Duke certainly has unique taste." "Yes," Blanche murmured, touching one petal gently. "He does." That evening, as Blanche prepared for bed, Agnes entered with a troubled expression. "My lady, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's most urgent and private." "At this hour? Who is it?" "She wouldn't give her name, my lady. She's waiting in the small parlor. I came to you directly without informing your parents." Curiosity overcoming propriety, Blanche donned her dressing gown and followed Agnes downstairs. In the small parlor, illuminated by a single lamp, stood a woman in a plain, dark cloak, her face partially hidden by its hood. "Thank you for seeing me, Lady Blanche," the woman said, lowering her hood to reveal a face that might once have been beautiful, but now showed signs of hardship and sorrow. "My name is Mary Hargreaves. Until 3 years ago I was known in certain circles as the Duke of Thornwood's mistress." Blanche felt as though the floor had tilted beneath her feet. "I don't think—" "Please," Mary interrupted, "I have risked much to come here tonight. All I ask is 5 minutes of your time." Slowly Blanche nodded, gesturing for the woman to continue. "I was young when I met Archibald Prescott, not much older than you are now. He was charming, generous, irresistible. For 2 years I lived in a house he provided, wore jewels he gave me, believed the promises he whispered." Her voice turned bitter. "Until the day I told him I was with child, his child." Blanche's hand went instinctively to her throat. "What happened?" "He changed in an instant. The man I thought I knew disappeared, replaced by someone cold, calculating. He accused me of lying, of trying to trap him. He gave me £100 and told me never to contact him again, to leave London or face the consequences. And the child? Blanche asked, dreading the answer. I lost it, Mary said simply. Perhaps from grief, perhaps from fear. I'll never know. But I tell you this not to hurt you, Lady Blanche, but to warn you. The Duke of Thornwood is a man of two faces. The one he shows the world, charming, controlled, civilized, and the one he reveals when he no longer needs to pretend. Why should I believe you? Blanche asked, though a part of her already did. You could be anyone with any motive. Mary reached into her cloak and withdrew a small brooch shaped like a wolf's head, its eyes two small rubies. He gave this to me on our first anniversary together. He has one identical to it. He wears it sometimes on his waistcoat. Ask him about it if you doubt me. Blanche had indeed seen such a pin among the Duke's possessions during one of his visits. Be careful, my lady, Mary continued. Watch for the signs. When his eyes grow cold, when his voice becomes too controlled, those are the moments to fear. Why tell me this now? Why not before the engagement was announced? I tried, Mary said simply. My letters were returned unopened. Your father's servants were instructed not to admit anyone without a proper introduction. She moved toward the door. I've said what I came to say. What you do with this information is your choice. But remember, once you are his wife, there will be no escape. After Mary left, Blanche remained in the parlor for a long time, her mind a tumult of confusion and fear. She thought of the Duke's controlled demeanor, his reputation, the warnings she had received, but she also remembered the gentleness of his touch when he placed the ring on her finger, the respect in his eyes when she spoke her mind, the way his face softened when he spoke to Lord Henry Caldwell. Which was the true Archibald Prescott, and what would happen when she became his wife? The night before her wedding, Blanche found herself unable to sleep, pacing her bedchamber as rain lashed against the windows. A storm had blown in from the east, bringing with it winds that howled through London streets like restless spirits. A knock at her door startled her. Agnes entered, carrying a package. This just arrived for you, my lady, by special messenger, despite the hour and the weather. The package was wrapped in black paper and tied with a silver ribbon. With trembling fingers, Blanche unwrapped it to find a box of polished wood. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, lay a single black rose, its petals gleaming with raindrops, and beside it, a card written in that now familiar bold hand, "Until tomorrow when you become mine. A." Blanche stared at the rose, symbol of the man she was to marry, beautiful, rare, and with thorns sharp enough to draw blood. Tomorrow she would walk down the aisle to meet him, would speak vows binding her life to his, would follow him to his home as his Duchess, and she would finally discover which face of the Duke of Thornwood would greet her when the doors closed behind them. St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled to capacity, the pews occupied by the cream of London society. White lilies and roses adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance hanging heavy in the air. Outside, a crowd had gathered to catch a glimpse of the bride and the notorious Duke of Thornwood. In a small antechamber, Blanche stood before a mirror, hardly recognizing the young woman who stared back at her. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and Brussels lace, the bodice adorned with seed pearls, the train extending 6 feet behind her. Her veil, family heirloom of delicate Honiton lace, was secured with the black rose hairpin the Duke had sent her. Her father entered, resplendent in formal attire, his expression a mixture of pride and resolution. "It is time, Blanche." She took his offered arm, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "Yes, father." The music swelled as the doors opened, and Blanche felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her. But she saw only one person, the tall figure standing at the altar, his broad shoulders encased in a coat of midnight blue, his expression unreadable as she began her slow walk toward him. With each step, Blanche felt the weight of her decision. She could still turn back, could still refuse, but to what end? Her family needed this alliance, and beyond duty, some part of her had become fascinated by the enigma that was Archibald Prescott. She wanted to solve the puzzle, to discover what lay beneath the fearsome reputation and controlled exterior. As she reached the altar, Her father placed her hand in the Duke's. Through her thin gloves, she could feel the warmth of his palm, the strength in his fingers as they closed around hers. She looked up at him then, meeting his grey eyes directly. Something passed between them in that moment, a silent acknowledgement, a promise unspoken. His expression softened almost imperceptibly, and he gave her hand a gentle squeeze before turning to face the vicar. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and solemn promises. Blanche heard herself speak her vows clearly, felt the cool metal of the ring as it slid onto her finger. And then it was done. She was no longer Lady Blanche Fields, but Blanche Prescott, Duchess of Thornwood. The Duke led her back down the aisle, her hand resting on his arm, her new wedding ring catching the light. Outside they were greeted by cheers from the gathered crowd and a shower of rose petals. The Duke's carriage waited, a magnificent vehicle drawn by 4 perfectly matched black horses. He handed her in carefully, then joined her, sitting close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the layers of her gown. As the carriage pulled away, heading toward the Thornwood mansion in Mayfair, where the wedding breakfast would be held, silence fell between them. "You look beautiful," he said finally, his deep voice startling her. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Archibald," he corrected her, "or Archie if you prefer. You are my wife now. Formality between us is unnecessary." "Archie," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "It seems too familiar for one such as yourself." His mouth curved in that almost smile. "Perhaps that is why I prefer it from you." The wedding breakfast was a lavish affair. The Thornwood mansion transformed into a wonderland of flowers and light. Blanche moved through the celebration in a daze, accepting congratulations, dancing with her new husband, smiling until her cheeks ached with the effort. She noticed Lady Eleanor Huntington watching them from across the room, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, the Countess raised her glass in a toast, her ruby lips curved in that same knowing smile Blanche had seen at the ball. As evening approached, Blanche found herself increasingly anxious about what was to come. Her mother had provided only the vaguest description of marital duties, emphasizing forbearance and submission rather than any practical details. When the time came for her to change into her travelling clothes, for they were to spend their wedding night at the Duke's country estate rather than in London, Blanche was led upstairs by a stern-faced older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper of Thornwood Hall. "I have served the Thornwood family for 30 years, Mrs. Porter informed her as she helped Blanche out of her wedding gown. His Grace's mother was a fine lady, God rest her soul. She would be pleased to see him finally married." "Did you know her well?" Blanche asked, eager for any insights into the family she had just joined. "Indeed, Your Grace," the housekeeper replied, the new form of address reminding Blanche of her altered status. "The late Duchess was kind but firm, much respected by the staff. His Grace was devoted to her." "And his father?" Mrs. Porter's expression hardened slightly. "The late Duke was a man of strong appetites and stronger temper. His Grace takes after him in looks, but in character he is more his mother's son, though few see it." This glimpse into Archie's childhood intrigued Blanche, but before she could inquire further, Mrs. Porter had finished helping her into a travelling outfit of deep blue velvet and was ushering her back downstairs where the Duke waited. They departed amid a flurry of well-wishes and ribald jokes from the gentlemen, which Blanche pretended not to hear. The Duke's travelling carriage was even more luxurious than the one they had used earlier, with cushioned seats and silk curtains that could be drawn for privacy. As they left London behind, darkness fell, and Blanche watched the city lights recede, replaced by the deeper darkness of the countryside. The Duke sat opposite her, his face illuminated intermittently by the passing of roadside lanterns. "Are you tired?" he asked after they had been travelling for some time. "A little," she admitted. "It has been rather an overwhelming day." "Indeed." He reached into a compartment beside him and produced a silver flask. "Brandy? It might help with the chill." Blanche hesitated, then accepted it, taking a small sip that burned pleasantly down her throat. "Thank you. You've conducted yourself admirably today," he said, watching her. "Many young ladies would have been overcome by the attention." "I was raised to maintain composure in public," Blanche replied. "My mother would accept nothing less." "Ah, yes, the indomitable Countess of Westwick. She reminds me somewhat of my own mother, a woman of firm principles and unwavering expectations. Mrs. Porter mentioned you were close to your mother." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps that she had been discussing him with the staff. Yes, she was a sanctuary in what was often a turbulent household. "And your father?" Blanche ventured, curious if he would confirm the housekeeper's veiled comments. The Duke's expression closed off immediately. "That is not a subject I care to discuss, particularly on my wedding night." "Forgive me," Blanche said quickly. "I did not mean to pry." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in a surprisingly human gesture. "No, I apologize. It is natural for you to have questions about the family you have joined. Perhaps another time we can discuss my parents, but for tonight let us speak of more pleasant things." The remainder of the journey passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation. The Duke asked about her childhood, her education, her interests. Blanche found herself telling him about her love of literature, her secret passion for sketching, even her childhood adventures with her cousin Catherine. In return, he shared stories of his time at Oxford, his travels on the continent, his interest in breeding horses. It was well past midnight when they finally arrived at Thornwood Hall, a magnificent estate set among rolling hills. Despite the hour, servants lined up to greet them, and Blanche was shown to a suite of rooms that took her breath away with their elegance and luxury. "These are the Duchess's apartments," the Duke explained, as he followed her into the sitting room. "They have been redecorated for your arrival, but if there is anything you wish to change, you need only inform the staff." Blanche looked around at the beautiful furnishings, the silk wallpaper, the exquisite paintings. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, the reality of their situation suddenly pressing in. Blanche was acutely aware that beyond the door to her right lay her bedchamber, and beyond that, the marital duties she had been so inadequately prepared to fulfill. The Duke cleared his throat. "I will leave you to settle in. Your lady's maid should arrive with the rest of the luggage shortly. When you are ready, I will return." He bowed formally and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Blanche sank onto a delicate sofa, her nerves a jumble of fear, curiosity, and something else she could not quite name. True to the Duke's word, Agnes arrived within the hour, helping Blanche to change into a nightgown of finest lawn trimmed with Brussels lace, part of her extensive trousseau. As Agnes brushed out her long hair, Blanche caught sight of her own reflection in the dressing-table mirror. Pale face, wide eyes, the delicate nightgown offering little concealment. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" Agnes asked, the new title still sounding strange to both of them. "No, thank you, Agnes. You may go." Left alone, Blanche paced nervously, uncertain of protocol. Should she wait in the sitting room, or should she be in bed when he arrived? Her mother's advice had been frustratingly vague on these practical matters. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Enter," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The Duke stepped into the room, now dressed in a silk dressing gown of deep burgundy. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he had just bathed, and he carried 2 crystal glasses of amber liquid. "I thought you might appreciate something to calm your nerves," he said, offering her one of the glasses. Blanche accepted it gratefully, taking a sip of what proved to be excellent brandy. "Thank you." "May I?" He gestured toward the sofa where she had been sitting earlier. "Of course." He sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could smell the clean scent of his skin, soap, sandalwood, and something uniquely him. "Blanche," he began, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it, "I am aware that you have likely received little practical guidance about what is to come. I want to assure you that I have no intention of rushing matters." She looked at him in surprise. "You don't?" "No." He set his glass down on a small table and turned to face her fully. "Marriage is a long journey, and this is but the first step. I would prefer that we begin with understanding rather than fear." Relief washed over her, followed by a surprising twinge of disappointment she quickly suppressed. "That is most considerate of you." "Not considerate," he corrected. "Practical. I want a wife who comes to me willingly, not one who submits out of duty or fear." He reached out slowly, as if not to startle her, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "You are very beautiful, Blanche Prescott." Her heart beat faster at the use of her new name, at the unexpected gentleness in his voice. "As are you," she replied without thinking, then blushed at her boldness. To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and lighting his grey eyes. "Beautiful. I have been called many things, Duchess, but never that." "Handsome, then," she amended, finding courage in his unexpected good humour. "Either way, I find no fault with your appearance, Your Grace." "Archie," he reminded her, still smiling, "and I am glad to hear it, since you are now bound to look upon this face for many years to come." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the atmosphere between them. His smile faded, replaced by an intensity that made her breath catch. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, giving her every opportunity to withdraw if she wished. Blanche remained perfectly still, her heart pounding as his lips touched hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper against her mouth. He drew back slightly, watching her reaction, then kissed her again, more firmly this time, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. The sensation was entirely new to Blanche, warm, pleasurable, slightly intoxicating. Without conscious thought, she leaned into the kiss, her lips parting slightly. The Duke, Archie, made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his other hand moving to her waist, drawing her closer. For several moments they remained thus, exploring this new territory between them with increasing boldness. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathing more rapidly. Archie's eyes had darkened, the grey now stormy with barely restrained passion. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "I think," he said, his voice husky, "that we should proceed more slowly than I had planned. I will bid you good night, Duchess." Confused by his sudden withdrawal, Blanche rose to her feet. "Have I done something wrong?" "No," he assured her quickly. "Quite the opposite, in fact. But I made a promise to myself, and I intend to keep it. Rest well, Blanche. We will have time enough for everything else." He bowed formally and left, leaving Blanche standing in the centre of her sitting room, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her mind a whirl of confusion and unexpected disappointment. She moved into her bedchamber and slipped beneath the covers of the enormous four-poster bed, certain she would never fall asleep after such an evening. Yet exhaustion claimed her quickly, and she drifted off, dreaming of grey eyes and gentle hands. Blanche awoke to sunlight streaming through windows that had been opened by some silent servant. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar room and luxurious bed confusing her. Then memory returned, the wedding, the journey, the kiss. She was the Duchess of Thornwood now, mistress of this grand estate, and wife to a man she was only beginning to understand. Agnes entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Your Grace. His Grace asked that you be allowed to sleep as long as you wished, but said to tell you that when you are ready he would like to show you the grounds." "What time is it?" Blanche asked, sitting up. "Just past 10, Your Grace. I've laid out a riding habit for you, as His Grace mentioned you might wish to explore on horseback." After a light breakfast, Blanche dressed in the riding habit of deep green velvet with gold braiding, another item from her extensive trousseau. Agnes arranged her hair in a simple chignon, and Blanche descended to find her husband waiting in the grand entrance hall. He was dressed for riding as well, his tall figure striking in a coat of dark brown and buckskin breeches. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart beat faster. "You look lovely," he said, coming forward to take her hand. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, noticing how his thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles before he released her. "The room is beautiful. I'm glad you approve. I had it redecorated based on what your mother told me of your preferences." This thoughtfulness surprised her. "You consulted my mother about my tastes. Of course, I wanted you to feel at home here." He offered his arm. "Shall we? The horses are waiting." Outside, two magnificent horses were indeed waiting, a spirited bay stallion for the Duke and a more sedate chestnut mare for Blanche. "She's gentle but not dull," Archie explained as he helped Blanche mount. "I was told you are an accomplished rider, so I thought you might appreciate a mount with some spirit." "Thank you," Blanche said, genuinely pleased by his consideration. "She's beautiful. Her name is Athena. She's yours now." Blanche stroked the mare's sleek neck, touched by the gift. "Thank you, Archie. That's most generous." He mounted his own horse with easy grace. "Come, there's much I want to show you." They rode through the extensive grounds of Thornwood Hall, Archie pointing out various features. The ancient oak woods to the north, the lake where he had learned to swim as a boy, the formal gardens his mother had designed. Throughout, he was attentive, occasionally reaching over to adjust Blanche's reins or pointing out a particularly treacherous patch of ground. They stopped to rest on a hilltop overlooking the estate. Thornwood Hall was magnificent from this vantage point, a grand house of golden stone with numerous chimneys and gables, surrounded by formal gardens that gave way to parkland and woods beyond. "It's breathtaking," Blanche said sincerely. "It is home," Archie replied simply, "and now it is yours as well." He helped her dismount so they could rest, spreading his coat on the grass for her to sit upon. They shared a flask of water he had brought, and for a time they simply sat in companionable silence, enjoying the view and the gentle spring breeze. "May I ask you something?" Blanche ventured finally. "You may ask anything you wish. Whether I answer is another matter," he replied, though his tone was light. "Last night, why did you leave?" He was silent for so long that Blanche thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I told you that I wanted a wife who came to me willingly, not out of duty or fear. Last night you were exhausted, overwhelmed, perhaps even a little afraid. I would not take advantage of such a state. And if I were to tell you that I am neither exhausted nor afraid today?" Blanche asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Archie's eyes darkened, and he reached out to touch her cheek gently. "Then, I would say that tonight, perhaps, we might continue where we left off." The rest of the day passed in a pleasant haze of activity. Archie showed her more of the estate, introduced her to key members of the staff, and gave her a tour of the house itself, which proved to be even larger and more magnificent than she had initially thought. They dined together in a small informal dining room rather than the grand formal one, the atmosphere between them increasingly relaxed and comfortable. Blanche found herself laughing at Archie's dry observations about London society, while he listened with genuine interest to her ideas about the household changes she might like to make. As evening approached, however, Blanche felt her nervousness return. She retired to her chambers to change for dinner, and Agnes helped her into a gown of deep blue silk that complemented her eyes and left her shoulders bare. "His Grace sent this, my lady," Agnes said, presenting a small box. Inside was a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that matched her engagement ring perfectly. Blanche allowed Agnes to fasten it around her neck, the cool stones resting against her skin like a promise. Dinner was an intimate affair, with courses served by silent footmen who seemed to disappear between services. Archie was attentive, refilling her wineglass, engaging her in conversation that ranged from literature to politics to the latest London gossip. As the meal concluded, Blanche felt a tension building between them, not uncomfortable but charged with anticipation. When Archie suggested they retire to the library for a nightcap, she agreed, her heartbeat quickening. The library was a magnificent room, 2 stories high with shelves reaching to the ceiling and a gallery running around the upper level. A fire burned in the massive fireplace, casting a warm glow over the comfortable leather chairs and sofas grouped nearby. Archie poured them each a small glass of brandy, then joined her on a sofa positioned before the fire. They talked for a while longer, but Blanche was increasingly aware of his proximity, of the way his eyes lingered on her face, her neck, the bare skin of her shoulders. Finally, he set his empty glass aside and turned to face her fully. "Blanche," he said, his voice deeper than usual, "I find myself at something of a loss." "In what way?" she asked, setting her own glass down. "I had planned to be patient, to give you time to adjust to your new life, to become comfortable with me before—" He trailed off, his eyes darkening as they fixed on her lips. "Before," she prompted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before claiming the full rights of a husband," he finished, "but I find my resolve weakening in your presence." Blanche's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "Perhaps I do not wish for such patience." His eyes locked with hers, searching for any sign of hesitation or fear. Finding none, he reached out slowly, his hand cupping her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "Are you certain?" he asked, his thumb brushing her lower lip. In answer, Blanche leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that, while innocent in execution, left no doubt as to her intentions. A low sound escaped him, something between a groan and a sigh, and then his arms were around her, pulling her against the hard warmth of his chest as his mouth claimed hers with newfound urgency. This kiss was different from those they had shared the previous night. Deeper, more insistent, filled with a hunger that awakened an answering need within Blanche herself. His hands moved to her back, tracing the line of her spine through the silk of her gown, while his lips traveled from her mouth to her jaw, then down to the sensitive skin of her neck. "Blanche," he murmured against her skin, "my Duchess, do you know how long I have waited for you?" The words confused her momentarily, pulling her back from the haze of sensation. "Waited? But we only met weeks ago." Archie drew back slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "I have waited much longer than that," he said cryptically. Then, before she could question him further, he stood and lifted her into his arms in one fluid motion. "If we are to continue this," he said, his voice rough with restrained passion, "it will not be here but in a proper bed befitting the Duchess of Thornwood." He carried her from the library, through the grand corridors of Thornwood Hall to his own chambers, a suite even more magnificent than hers, dominated by an enormous bed with hangings of deep blue velvet. Setting her gently on her feet, Archie stepped back, his eyes never leaving hers. "Last chance to change your mind, Duchess," he said softly. "Say the word, and I will escort you back to your own chambers with no loss of respect or affection." Blanche considered him, this complex man who was now her husband, who had shown her consideration and restraint when his reputation suggested he would do otherwise. The warnings she had received seemed distant now, overshadowed by the man she was coming to know. "I do not wish to change my mind," she said clearly. "I am your wife, Archie, in every way." Something flared in his eyes, relief, triumph, desire, and then he was closing the distance between them, his hands framing her face as he kissed her with a passion that left no room for doubt or hesitation. With gentle but assured movements, he helped her out of her gown, his fingers deft with the fastenings, his eyes darkening as each new expanse of skin was revealed. Blanche felt momentary shyness as she stood before him in only her thin chemise, but the naked admiration in his gaze dispelled her uncertainty. "You are exquisite," he breathed, his hands warm against her bare shoulders. "More beautiful than I dared imagine." He shed his own clothing with less ceremony, revealing a physique that made Blanche blush anew, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, muscled arms and chest bearing the scars of a life lived boldly, long legs that explained his impressive height. Taking her hand, he led her to the bed, drawing back the covers and helping her onto the cool sheets. When he joined her, the warmth of his body seemed to envelop her, his skin hot against hers as he gathered her close. "I will be gentle," he promised, his lips brushing her ear. "Trust me, Blanche." And she did, surrendering to his touch, to his guidance, to the new and overwhelming sensations he awoke within her. He was patient, attentive, reading her responses with uncanny accuracy, prolonging their pleasure, until Blanche felt she might shatter from the intensity of it. When they finally came together fully, there was a moment of discomfort that he eased with whispered reassurances and tender kisses. And then there was only pleasure, building in waves until it crested in a release so profound that tears sprang to Blanche's eyes. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the rumpled sheets, Archie's arms holding her securely against his chest, Blanche felt a peace she had not expected, a rightness that transcended the physical act they had shared. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Yes," she replied truthfully. "I had not expected. That is, I did not know it could be so." "Pleasurable?" he supplied when she faltered. "Yes." He chuckled, the sound vibrating pleasantly against her ear where it rested on his chest. "That, my dear Duchess, was merely the beginning. There is much more I have yet to teach you." Blanche propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. In the dim light of the bedchamber, his face was softer, more open than she had ever seen it. "You speak as if you have planned this extensively." "Perhaps I have," he admitted, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I told you I have been waiting for you. That was not an idle comment." "What did you mean by that?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her newfound languor. Archie was silent for a moment, his expression turning serious. "Do you recall the Harrington ball 2 seasons ago?" You wore a gown of pale green and danced with your cousin's husband. Blanche thought back, surprised. Yes, I remember, but I don't recall seeing you there. You wouldn't have. I arrived late and stayed only briefly. But I saw you, laughing at something your partner said, your face alive with intelligence and humor. You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Why did you not approach me then? She asked, astonished by this revelation. His expression darkened slightly. I was not in a position to court anyone at that time. There were matters that required resolution before I could consider marriage. What matters? She pressed, sensing they were approaching territory he had thus far avoided. Archie sighed, his hand continuing its gentle caress of her shoulder. It is late, and this is hardly the time for such discussions. Suffice it to say, I made inquiries about you, kept track of your movements in society, and waited for the right moment to approach your father. So our meeting was not as coincidental as it appeared, Blanche mused. No, he admitted, though your father was surprisingly receptive to my interest, given my reputation. He was in need of funds, Blanche said frankly, and your wealth is as legendary as your temper. Archie's eyebrows rose at her directness. Indeed, though I hope you now have reason to doubt at least some of what you've heard about me. Perhaps, she conceded, settling back against his chest, though I reserve judgment until I know you better. He laughed again, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Wise as well as beautiful. I chose well, it seems. They fell silent, the comfortable weight of shared intimacy settling over them. Blanche felt herself drifting towards sleep, lulled by the steady beat of Archie's heart beneath her ear. Just before consciousness slipped away entirely, she heard him whisper, his voice so soft she might have imagined it. I have been waiting for you all my life, Blanche Prescott, and I will spend the rest of it ensuring you never regret becoming mine. The first weeks of marriage passed in a pleasant blur for Blanche. Each day brought new discoveries about Thornwood Hall, about her position as Duchess, and most intriguingly, about her husband. Archie proved to be a considerate, if sometimes demanding, spouse. During the day, he attended to the business of the estate, occasionally riding out to visit tenant farms or meeting with his steward to discuss improvements. He included Blanche in these discussions, valuing her opinions and encouraging her to take an active role in the management of their home. In the evenings they dined together, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes engaged in spirited debates about literature, politics, or philosophy. Archie's intelligence was formidable, his knowledge extensive, and Blanche found herself both challenged and stimulated by their conversations. And at night, he was a passionate and attentive lover, guiding her through the intricacies of physical pleasure, with a patience that belied his reputation for impatience in all other matters. Yet for all their growing closeness, Blanche was aware of walls still standing between them, subjects Archie avoided, parts of himself he kept carefully hidden. He never spoke of his father, changed the subject whenever the previous duke was mentioned, and became remote whenever Blanche inquired too deeply into his life before their marriage. One afternoon, about a month after their wedding, Blanche was exploring the lesser-used parts of the house when she came upon a portrait she had not seen before. It hung in a dimly lit corridor of the east wing, partially obscured by a heavy curtain, as if someone had attempted to hide it without quite removing it entirely. The painting depicted a man of perhaps 40, with features startlingly similar to Archie's, the same high cheekbones, the same strong jaw, the same tall, powerful build. But where Archie's eyes were grey and often warmed with humour or desire when he looked at her, this man's eyes were cold blue, his expression one of barely restrained cruelty. "I see you've found him," came a voice from behind her. Blanche turned to find Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, watching her with an unreadable expression. "The previous Duke?" Blanche guessed. "Indeed, Your Grace. His late Grace, the 7th Duke of Thornwood, father to our current Duke." "Why is his portrait hidden away like this?" Blanche asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Mrs. Porter hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to the family and honesty with its newest member. "It is not my place to speak of family matters, Your Grace." "I am family now," Blanche pointed out gently, "and I would understand my husband better if I knew more of his past." The older woman sighed. "Very well, but not here, if you please. Some conversations are better held in private." She led Blanche to a small sitting room nearby, checking that they were alone before closing the door firmly. "The late Duke was not a kind man," Mrs. Porter began, choosing her words carefully. "To the outside world he presented a face of charm and cultivation, but within these walls he was different." "Different how?" Blanche pressed. "Cruel, Your Grace. Particularly to His Grace's mother, the late Duchess, and to the young master himself." Mrs. Porter's face hardened with old anger. "I served as lady's maid to the Duchess before becoming housekeeper. I saw things, heard things, that no child should have to endure." Blanche felt a chill run through her as pieces began to fall into place. Archie's reluctance to discuss his father, the control he exerted over his own temper, the flashes of vulnerability she sometimes glimpsed beneath his carefully maintained exterior. "What happened to him? To the previous Duke?" "He died when the current Duke was 17, Mrs. Porter replied. "A riding accident, they said, though there were whispers." "What kind of whispers?" Blanche asked, her heart beating faster. The housekeeper looked away. "That it was no accident, that the young master confronted his father about the treatment of the Duchess, who was ill by then. That words became blows, and in the struggle that followed," she trailed off meaningfully. "You believe Archie, His Grace, was responsible for his father's death?" Blanche clarified, shocked. "I believe justice was done," Mrs. Porter said firmly, "and I believe His Grace has spent every day since then ensuring he does not become the man his father was. It is why he kept himself apart from society for so many years, why he was so selective in choosing a bride." She looked directly at Blanche now. "He feared passing on that legacy, you see, the temper, the cruelty, until he met you." "Me, but why would I make a difference?" Mrs. Porter smiled slightly. "Because, Your Grace, you remind him of his mother in all the ways that matter. Your strength, your kindness, your unwillingness to be cowed by his reputation. The late Duchess was similarly spirited before years of mistreatment broke her spirit." This revelation left Blanche reeling. She thanked Mrs. Porter for her honesty and retreated to the gardens to think, walking the gravel paths as she attempted to reconcile this new information with the man she was coming to know. If what the housekeeper said was true, Archie's fearsome reputation, his controlled demeanor, even his reluctance to marry until now, all of it took on new meaning. He wasn't a heartless rake, but a man determined not to repeat the sins of his father, a man who had perhaps kept himself isolated to protect others from what he feared lurked within himself. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger from London, bearing a letter marked with the seal of Lord Fitzwilliam, her father's friend who had helped arrange her marriage. The footman delivered it to her with a bow, and Blanche broke the seal, curious what news he might have. The contents of the letter turned her blood to ice. "My dear Lady Blanche, for so I shall always think of you, I write with grave concerns for your safety and well-being. Information has come to light regarding your husband that I feel duty-bound to share, despite the risk to myself in doing so. The Duke of Thornwood's previous engagement to Lady Victoria Pembroke was not broken by the lady, as society believes. Rather, the lady discovered something so disturbing about the Duke that she fled for her very life. I have learned from a reliable source that the Duke was responsible for the death of his own father, and that his mother's subsequent illness and death were hastened by her knowledge of this fact. Furthermore, it has come to my attention that the Duke has developed an unhealthy obsession with you, having watched you from afar for some time before orchestrating your marriage. His financial assistance to your father was merely a means to an end, securing you as his possession. I urge you to exercise extreme caution. If you find yourself in danger, remember you have allies who can help you escape the fate that nearly befell Lady Victoria. Destroy this letter upon reading. The Duke has eyes and ears everywhere." Your concerned friend, Lord Fitzwilliam. Blanche, read the letter twice, her hands shaking. The accusations aligned with what Mrs. Porter had just revealed about Archie's father, but cast the events in a far more sinister light. And the claim about his obsession with her, was that merely a twisted interpretation of the interest he had admitted to harboring since seeing her at the Harrington ball? She was still standing in the garden, the letter clutched in her hand, when she heard the crunch of gravel behind her. Turning, she saw Archie approaching, still dressed in his riding clothes, his face lighting with a smile when he saw her. "There you are," he said warmly. "I've been looking for you." Instinctively, Blanche crumpled the letter in her fist, hiding it in the folds of her skirt. "I was just walking. The gardens are lovely this time of year." Archie frowned, his gaze sharpening as he noticed her agitation. "What's wrong, Blanche? You look pale." "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just a slight headache from the sun." He stepped closer, his eyes falling to her half-concealed hand. "What are you holding?" "Just a letter. From home." "May I see it?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. Blanche hesitated, torn between trust and the warning contained in the letter itself. "It's nothing important." Archie's expression hardened, a flash of something dark crossing his features. "If it's nothing important, you won't mind sharing it." He held out his hand expectantly, and Blanche felt a flicker of fear. Was this the man Lord Fitzwilliam warned her about? The man who might have killed his own father? "Blanche," Archie said, his voice softening as he noticed her reaction. "Please." Trust works both ways. The gentle reminder, an echo of conversations they had shared in intimate moments, decided her. She handed him the crumpled letter, watching his face carefully as he read it. His expression changed as his eyes moved down the page. First confusion, then shock, then a cold, controlled anger that transformed his features into something reminiscent of the portrait she had discovered. "I see," he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. "And do you believe these accusations, Duchess?" Blanche straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "I believe there is truth mixed with falsehood in that letter. I believe you have kept parts of yourself hidden from me. And I believe it is time for complete honesty between us, Archie, if this marriage is to have any chance of happiness." For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, abruptly, he turned on his heel. "Come with me." He led her back into the house, up the grand staircase, and to a part of the mansion she had not yet explored, a tower room accessible only by a narrow, winding staircase. The room itself was sparsely furnished, a desk, a few chairs, and shelves lined with leather-bound journals. "My private study," Archie explained, as he closed the door behind them. "No one comes here without my permission, not even the servants." He crossed to the desk and unlocked a drawer with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. From it, he withdrew a packet of letters tied with black ribbon and a small portrait miniature. "You want the truth, Blanche? Here it is." He handed her the miniature first. It showed a beautiful woman with gentle eyes and a sweet smile. Eyes the same grey as Archie's, though lacking the shadows that often darkened his. "My mother, the late Duchess. She died when I was 18, a year after my father." Next, he untied the packet of letters, selecting one and handing it to her. "Read this. It explains more than I could." The letter was written in a delicate, feminine hand, dated some 20 years earlier. "My dearest son, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and it is time for you to know the truth I could never speak aloud. Your father's death was not the accident the world believes it to be. On that terrible night, he returned from London in one of his rages, the kind you and I both learned to fear. But this time was different. This time his anger was directed solely at you, for reasons I will not soil this page by repeating. When he went to your chambers, I followed, terrified of what he might do in his drunken state. I found him standing over you with his riding crop raised, and without thought I pushed him away with all my strength. He fell against the fireplace, striking his head on the stone hearth. It was I who killed your father, Archibald. Not you, though I know you have carried that burden of guilt since that night, believing your attempt to defend yourself led to his death. I allowed you to believe this, rather than risk your taking the blame to protect me. I make this confession now, so that you may free yourself from the shadow that has darkened your life. You are not your father's son in the ways that matter, my darling boy. You have his strength, but not his cruelty, his determination, but not his selfishness. Do not let fear of becoming him keep you from the happiness you deserve. Find a woman worthy of the good man I know you to be, and build the family we never truly had. With all my love." Your mother Blanche looked up from the letter, tears blurring her vision. "Archie, now you know," he said simply. "I didn't kill my father. My mother did to protect me. But I let the world believe the worst of me rather than tarnish her memory. The only people who knew the truth were Lord Caldwell, who helped conceal the true nature of my father's death, and Lady Victoria Pembroke. The woman you were engaged to," Blanche said softly. "Yes, I made the mistake of trusting her with the truth, believing she loved me enough to keep my mother's secret. Instead, she threatened to reveal everything unless I increased her settlement. When I refused to be blackmailed, she broke our engagement and spread rumors designed to damage my reputation further. And Lord Fitzwilliam? How does he fit into this? Archie's expression darkened. Fitzwilliam was my father's closest friend and shared many of his proclivities. He has hated me since my father's death, believing the worst of the rumors. When he learned I was interested in you, he positioned himself as your family's friend to stay close to the situation. But he helped arrange our marriage, Blanche pointed out, confused. No, Blanche. He tried to prevent it by telling your father terrible stories about me, which is why your father initially hesitated. It was only when I offered financial terms generous enough to overcome his objections that your father agreed. Blanche digested this information slowly, pieces falling into place. And what of his claim that you've been watching me, that you're obsessed with me? A flush crept up Archie's neck. I told you I saw you at the Harrington ball and was captivated. That much is true. I made inquiries about you, attended events where I knew you would be present, even rode past your family's home on occasion. But obsession, he shook his head. I prefer to think of it as determination to know the woman I hoped would one day be my wife. Why me? Blanche asked, the question that had troubled her from the beginning. Of all the eligible young ladies in London, why choose someone with so little dowry, from a family in financial difficulties? Archie's expression softened, and he reached out to touch her cheek gently. Because when I saw you that night, laughing without artifice, kindness radiating from you like light, I recognized something I had been searching for my entire life. A woman strong enough to stand beside me, gentle enough to heal the wounds of my past, and brave enough to look beyond my reputation to the man beneath. His honesty, the vulnerability in his eyes, touched something deep within Blanche. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and placed her hand over his heart. Thank you for trusting me with the truth, she said softly. All of it. No more secrets between us, he promised, covering her hand with his own. Though I fear the revelations may have changed your feelings toward me. They have, she admitted, but not in the way you fear. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed what words could not: acceptance, forgiveness, and the beginnings of something that might, with time and trust, grow into love. Their quiet moment was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Archie frowned, clearly annoyed by the disturbance of his private sanctuary, but called for the visitor to enter. It was Mrs. Porter, her face grave. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but there is a matter requiring immediate attention. Lord Fitzwilliam has arrived quite unexpectedly and is demanding to see Her Grace. He seems agitated. Archie's expression darkened. Did he say why he has come? No, Your Grace. Only that he must speak with the Duchess on a matter of urgency, and that he will not leave until he has done so. Blanche felt a chill of apprehension. It's hardly a coincidence that he appears immediately after sending that letter. Indeed. Archie's voice was cold with controlled anger. Mrs. Porter, have Lord Fitzwilliam shown to the blue drawing-room and inform him that the Duchess and I will attend him shortly. After the housekeeper had gone, Archie turned to Blanche, his face serious. You don't have to see him, I can send him away. She shook her head. No, I want to hear what he has to say, but I want you with me. His expression softened slightly. Are you certain? He may be less forthcoming if I am present. I'm certain, she said firmly. We face this together, as husband and wife. No more secrets, remember? Archie nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. Together, then. They found Lord Fitzwilliam pacing the blue drawing-room, a portly figure in an expensive but slightly dishevelled travelling coat. He spun to face them as they entered, his expression shifting from relief at the sight of Blanche to alarm when he saw Archie beside her. Lady Blanche, thank goodness I came as soon as I could. We must speak privately at once. Anything you have to say to my wife can be said in my presence, Archie stated coldly, his hand protectively at the small of Blanche's back. Lord Fitzwilliam's face reddened. This is a delicate matter concerning your safety, my dear. Surely you would prefer— I would prefer you explain why you sent me a letter filled with accusations against my husband, Blanche interrupted, her voice steady. And why you have now appeared in person to continue what I can only assume is an attempt to disrupt my marriage. The older man's expression faltered. I see he has already poisoned your mind against me. I feared as much. The letter I sent contained only the truth, warnings from those who care for your well-being. Like Lady Victoria Pembroke, Archie suggested, his tone deceptively mild. Or perhaps the ghost of my father, with whom you shared so many interests. Lord Fitzwilliam blanched. I don't know what lies he has told you, Lady Blanche, but I implore you to consider your position carefully. There are things you don't know about this man, things that would make your blood run cold. Such as the true circumstances of his father's death? Blanche asked quietly. Or the reason for Lady Victoria's departure from England? Because my husband has shared those truths with me already, along with the nature of your friendship with the previous Duke. The older man's face drained of colour. He has told you his version, no doubt, a pretty tale to win your sympathy. Along with evidence to support it, Blanche countered, including a letter from his late mother confessing to her role in his father's death, a confession she made to protect her son from the burden of guilt he had carried. Lies, Lord Fitzwilliam hissed, though he looked less certain now. The 7th Duke was a great man, a true nobleman. His death was no accident, whatever tale the Duchess may have concocted to protect her precious son. My father was a monster, Archie said flatly, stepping forward. A man who beat his wife, terrorized his son, and considered cruelty a nobleman's privilege. A man who found kindred spirits in men like yourself, Fitzwilliam, who shared his appetites for inflicting pain on those weaker than himself. Lord Fitzwilliam's face contorted with rage. How dare you? I was his most loyal friend. Yes, Archie agreed coldly. That is precisely the problem. Blanche moved to stand beside her husband, her head held high. I believe we have heard enough, Lord Fitzwilliam. You came here under the pretense of concern for my welfare, but your true purpose seems to be the continuation of a vendetta against my husband. I must ask you to leave. The older man stared at her in disbelief. You choose to believe him, after everything I've told you? I choose to believe the evidence of my own eyes and heart, Blanche replied firmly. I choose to stand with my husband, and I choose to ask you for the final time to leave our home. For a moment it seemed Lord Fitzwilliam might continue to argue. Then, with a last venomous glare at Archie, he snatched up his hat and gloves. You'll regret this, Lady Blanche, mark my words. That will be your grace to you, Archie corrected him coldly. And should you ever approach my wife again with your poisonous insinuations, I will ensure you regret it far more than she ever could. After Lord Fitzwilliam's departure, a silence fell between them. Blanche felt drained by the confrontation, yet strangely exhilarated by the unity she and Archie had displayed. Thank you, Archie said quietly, breaking the silence, for standing with me, for believing in me. Blanche turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. I meant what I said, Archie. I believe the evidence of my eyes and heart. And what they tell me is that you are a good man who has carried burdens no one should have to bear. He drew her close, his arms encircling her with gentle strength. I do not deserve you, Blanche Prescott. Perhaps not, she teased lightly, tilting her face up to his. But you have me nonetheless. His kiss was tender, a promise and a pledge all at once. When they finally drew apart, his grey eyes were lighter than she had ever seen them. The shadows receded for the moment. Come, he said, taking her hand. I believe it's time I introduced you properly to my mother. He led her back to the portrait gallery, but not to the hidden painting of his father. Instead, he stopped before a luminous portrait of the woman from the miniature. The late Duchess, dressed in blue, her grey eyes kind and intelligent, her smile gentle yet strong. She would have loved you, Archie said softly. She always hoped I would find someone who would help me break free of the past, someone who would see beyond the walls I built to protect myself. Tell me about her, Blanche encouraged, leaning against his shoulder. And so he did, sharing stories of his mother's courage, her wit, her unwavering love for her son even in the darkest times. As he spoke, Blanche felt the last barriers between them crumbling, replaced by a foundation of truth and trust that promised a future far brighter than either could have imagined at the start of their arranged marriage. 1 year later, Blanche stood by the nursery window, watching the first snowflakes of winter drift past the glass. In her arms, her 2-month-old son slept peacefully, his tiny features a perfect blend of his parents', Archie's strong jawline already hinted at in the rounded baby face, Blanche's golden brown hair curling softly on the small head. Behind her, the door opened quietly, and she turned to see Archie entering, his face lighting with the smile that was now a common sight rather than the rarity it had once been. "There are my treasures," he said softly, crossing to stand beside her. He placed one hand gently on his son's head, the other arm encircling Blanche's waist. "How is he today?" "Perfect," Blanche replied, leaning into her husband's embrace. "Though Mrs. Porter insists he has your temper when he doesn't get his way immediately." Archie chuckled. "Let us hope he has your patience to balance it then." He pressed a kiss to her temple, and Blanche closed her eyes, savoring the contentment that had become their daily reality. The past year had brought changes neither could have predicted. Not just the birth of their son, Edward Henry Prescott, but the gradual healing of old wounds as Archie learned to trust, to open himself fully to the love she offered. There had been challenges, of course. Archie's temper still flared occasionally, though he had learned to channel it into productive outlets rather than allowing it to control him. Blanche had faced the skepticism of society, many still believing the worst of the Duke, despite the evidence of the happy, stable marriage they witnessed. But they had faced each obstacle together, their bond strengthening with each test overcome. And now, with their son in their arms and their future stretching before them, the fears and doubts that had marked the beginning of their journey seemed as distant as the reputation that had once terrified Blanche. "What are you thinking?" Archie asked, noting her contemplative expression. Blanche smiled up at him. "I was remembering our wedding night when you whispered, 'I've been waiting for you.'" "Ah." His eyes darkened with memory and desire. "And have I proven worth the wait, Duchess?" "Every day," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "Every single day." As if sensing his parents' happiness, little Edward stirred in Blanche's arms, his eyes grey like his father's but without the shadows, blinking open to gaze up at them. "Hello, my son," Archie murmured, gently taking the baby from Blanche's arms and cradling him with the confidence he had developed over the past months. "Have you been dreaming of horses and adventures like your papa used to?" Blanche watched them together, her heart full to bursting with love for these two, the man who had overcome his past to become the husband and father she now witnessed, and the child who represented their shared future, free from the shadows that had once threatened to engulf them both. Outside, the snow began to fall more heavily, a clean white blanket covering the grounds of Thornwood Hall. But inside the nursery, warmed by love and lit by the soft glow of family bonds, Blanche knew they had created something far more enduring than any winter could challenge. A home built on truth, trust, and the kind of love that transforms even the most fearsome reputations into footnotes of a story still being written. The end. Dear listener, if this story found you today, perhaps it wasn't by chance. Perhaps the universe is gently reminding you of something time sometimes makes us forget. You still deserve to be happy. It doesn't matter how many winters your soul has endured, how many silences you've carried, or how often someone said certain joys are no longer meant for you. The truth is quite different. As long as there is life, there is beauty, there is emotion. There are unexpected reunions between who we were and who we still might become. Just like Blanche and the Duke, who believed their fates were sealed by pain, duty, or the past, you too can allow yourself to be surprised. It's never too late to feel something true, never too late to love again, to laugh again, to feel again. Never too late to open the window and let in a new ray of sunlight, even a shy one, carrying promises of tenderness. Open yourself to possibility. Let life whisper something new to you. Maybe the next joy is waiting in the next morning, in an unexpected conversation, or in the simple pleasure of a warm cup of coffee that smells like a sweet memory. And tonight, rest your heart. Let go of the weight of the days. Leave the world outside, just for a moment. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You've already triumphed for all that you've lived, for all that you've felt. Now, just live your life, and live it joyfully. May sleep come to you like a gentle embrace, and may the night bring peaceful, protected dreams, wrapped in stillness and grace. You are important, you are loved, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. With all our gratitude, Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. We hope this story wrapped around your heart like a warm blanket, reminding you that even in the darkest times, love can arrive, quietly but powerfully, and change everything. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting us. It's what gives us the strength and joy to keep creating these stories full of romance, redemption and deep emotion. And don't forget, at the end of this video there's another story waiting just for you. Click and discover another tale that will stir your soul. Thank you for being here. The Legends of the Fall Team.